And away we go. Alright then, so let's see what goes on in the news sphere. Actually, there is an Instagram post I've seen recently, actually just a few minutes before starting this recording, and I think a lot of outlets would report on this. MPs pass vote to rejoin EU Customs Union, not the European Union, the European Union Customs Union, which, from my understanding, is like particular agreements and particular rates of how different countries around the world just negotiate particular deals and discounts on each other imports and exports. The EU Customs Union is like universally unified agreed tariffs and deals for all EU countries to negotiate such rates with other countries outside of the EU. And even though the United Kingdom has left the European Union as a member many years ago, the UK now, through votes from members of parliament, wants to continue getting the benefits that a lot of European Union nations have had ever since the EU was first established. Import and exports goods and services amongst each other at either discounted or no fee whatsoever. But otherwise, I think there'll be some fees, even though there may not be a member. I mean, it's kind of complicated in my opinion about how the EU functions, but that's just me. So yeah, when I first heard about Brexit and the United Kingdom is no longer a member of the European Union, I had two thoughts running about my mind. On one hand, the UK managed to save themselves roughly 300 million pounds a year, a week, or at least 300 million pounds in membership fees to be a member of the EU, which could have gone to the NHS, which is what a lot of pro-Brexit people said that the money could be used to go towards. But how is that 300 million pounds going right now? I'm just curious. So whatever hundreds of millions of pounds that would have gone towards EU membership would likely go towards other services in the United Kingdom. On the other hand, trade within the EU and no, not the EU, goods and services within the United Kingdom, whilst doing pretty good, given the years that the UK was a member of the EU, they have been so reliant and they've depended so much on getting goods and services from other EU countries, either at a reduced rate or no rate at all. And since the UK no longer a member of the EU, now the UK has to negotiate particular trade deals and terms with the EU as a whole on what trade rates and tariffs are to be put in place from both ends. And because the reliance the UK had on the EU at the time, even when the United Kingdom had played a huge role within the EU, especially paying so much in membership fees, which then economically benefited a lot of smaller EU nations like the Baltic nations and the Mediterranean island nations like Cyprus and Malta. People in the UK don't believe that being part of the EU was as much benefit that people thought they would have gotten out of being in the EU. Hence why they voted to leave the EU, because what's the point being part of something if there isn't much benefit going to the UK? And instead, a lot of the benefit goes to other smaller countries with much smaller economies. That's the argument I've heard with people that voted to leave the EU, or no longer be a member of the EU. Now, not to say this will make any difference just to be part of the EU Customs Union. However, To anyone asking why the UK should rejoin the EU, trade sounds like a very major reason. And you know what? I don't blame them. There's a lot of benefits being amongst in trade terms similar to the EU. In fact, Turkey, even though they're not a member of the EU, Turkey is part of the EU customs union, and look how that's going for them. So long as you don't talk about the lira, which is not a very strong currency at the moment, but that's the story for another time. Otherwise, yeah. Now, of course, the UK won't have much of a say on how the EU operates since they won't, they aren't a member right now, and nor there isn't much strong support to even be a member of the EU again. At least for the UK to be part of the EU customs union is at least a starting point. Question is, how will the pro-Brexit voters take this news? I know for sure that yeah, actually, I was going to mention someone, but that's a good question. But anyway, surely someone is not going to be happy about the UK wanting to be part of the EU customs union again, along with other benefits that you get as being a EU member. But of course, if the UK is part of the EU customs union again, then all of the trade deals and negotiations the UK had since they left the EU, like trade deals with the United States, Australia, Canada, maybe a country in the Middle East. That's a bit of a stretch, but a lot of the trade deals that the UK set up with other countries since leaving the EU are just going to vanish if the UK decides to rejoin the customs union. Because being part of the customs union means that you agree to follow the same, or at least mostly the same, trade deals and negotiation rates as other EU nations, even if you're not a member. The customs union plays a huge role in terms of international trade, and that, alone with other reasons, is why a lot of countries in the European Union want to be a member of the EU to begin with, to take advantage of the trade benefits that gives you being part of the customs union, as well as having MEPs to represent local people in European countries, to shape how the EU functions, how it operates, and other benefits that you get from being part of the EU, which I'll say is pretty handy and very good. However, there is so much that goes into EU that, in my opinion, is a bit much. Not that it's a bad thing, but I think there will be people that argue that what's the point having this thing and that thing and so on? Isn't these things just enough to have people want to be part of the EU, or at least get some benefit out of the EU? But yeah, that's how things stand at the moment. I don't have strong now. Whilst I have said so much about the EU, I don't have a strong opinion about the UK wanting to join the EU customs union again. I will say, however, that whatever happens, in fact, if this does go ahead and the EU does decide to bring the UK back into the customs union again, to be honest, I think a lot of Brexit voters are going to stir up a fuss again. They certainly will. Now, even though they're not going to be members of the EU again, which Nigel Farage, for his time as an MEP, have pushed so much for, he is still strongly against the customs union as the UK being a full-time member of the European Union. And if this goes through, Nigel Farage is going to have quite a field day with this. He certainly will. Louvre thieves escaped with just 30 seconds to spare, Senate inquiry finds. On Wednesday, investigators revealed 4 intruders fled moments before police reached the Apollo Gallery after a daylight heist on Sunday, October 19th, escaping on powerful motorbikes. Earlier audits and recommendations include a 2019 Van Cleef and Appel review were not implemented, and last month's France's state auditor criticized security upgrades as proceeding at a woefully inadequate pace. Investigators found only one of two nearby security cameras was working, and the security headquarters lacked enough screens, while the riverside balcony was easily reached using an extendable ladder. Police say they have arrested all four intruders. Museum staff will strike Monday over understaffing, and France's lower house of parliament will question Laurence Descartes, Louvre boss, and Jean-Luc Martinet next week. It highlights an overall failure of the museum, as well as its supervisory authority to address security issues, Laurent Lafont said, while investigators noted $102 million crown jewels remain missing. So we've got more information on the Louvre thieves, and it turns out it's still not looking good. It's bad enough to have thieves rob all of your valuable items without a trace, but it's another issue, much more embarrassingly, to have it done in broad daylight when more people should have witnessed what was going on with the thieves taking the jewels. Surely people would have known something was up. This just shows how embarrassing the security is at the Louvre in Paris. I can't stress enough how embarrassing that is for people working at that museum. Yeah, of course you're gonna have thieves stealing something, but it's a separate issue altogether, having done in broad daylight, when the chances of being caught would be a lot higher. It's either the response of people observing the scene were quite delayed, or the thieves are very, very sneaky and crafty. I don't think more likely the latter, but if not the latter, then wow, yeah, that's shocking. Surely other museums around the world should learn from this to ramp up their security, make sure that even in broad daylight, during the day, there is always someone securing the valuables, because you never know if anyone is going to come and steal it from you. It it's just shocking, man. It really is. Son arrested after Grammy-nominated singer Jubilant Skies is stabbed to death at California home. Santa Monica officers discovered Jubilant Skies, 71-year-old Grammy-nominated classical and gospel baritone, stabbed and pronounced dead at his Pico neighborhood home on December 8, 2025, while his son, Micah Skies, 31, was taken into custody. Police say officers arrived after a 911 call around 2 p.m. near 18th Street and Delaware Avenue, and the caller directed Santa Monica Police Department into the home where they found the injured man. The late Jubilant Skies had performed worldwide at venues like the Metropolitan Opera, Carnegie Hall and Kennedy Center, and earned a 2010 Grammy nomination for Bernstein Mass. Well, Calvary Baptist Church members and friends remembered him as a notable, charismatic singer. Authorities say the suspect was booked on suspicion of homicide around 7 a.m. on December 9th. He is held on $2 million bail with a court appearance on December 11th. Local reports say the suspect, Micah Skies, had mental health struggles. Lieutenant Lewis Gilmore stated, based on the preliminary investigation, detectives believe this was an isolated incident contained within the household, and police urged tips to Detective Peter Zamirov. Firstly, I'm not sure if I said his name right, Jubilant Skies. Other than that, secondly, rest in peace to Jubilant Sky. Jubilant Sky. I send my condolences to his friends and family during this difficult time. And thirdly, whoever is responsible, surely they'll get the punishment they deserve. Again, don't know much about the guy. I'm not sure what he has done wrong, but even if, and I'm not saying it's true, even if he has done horrible things in the past, whoever killed the guy is no better than he is. But again, that's hypothetical. I'm not saying it's true. Otherwise, it's unfortunate that people of all backgrounds, notoriety, social classes, and backgrounds lose their lives when they least expect it. And they will least expect when they lose their lives. But still, it's very unfortunate that someone was stabbed to death in their own home. And to anyone who enjoys his music, I'm not gonna see him again or hear anything new from him if he did plan on releasing new music. So yeah, Neanderthals made fire 350,000 years earlier than previously thought, scientists find. Published on December 10th, the British Museum-led study in Nature reports fire-making evidence in Barnham, Suffolk, over 400,000 years ago. 350 years. Researchers have debated whether early hominins made fire or captured wildfires, complicating interpretation amid sparse, ambiguous evidence, despite traces as early as 1.5 million years and Neanderthal claims around 40,000 years ago. At Barnham, excavators uncovered heated clay, heat-scattered flint hand axes, and 2 fragments of iron pyrite, while laboratory analysis show repeated heating above 700 degrees Celsius and pyrite transport. Study authors say intentional fire-making enabled cooking, improving nutrition and brain growth, but no hominin remains were found. So early Neanderthals, or Homo heidelbergensis, plausible candidates. Some reviewers noted the lack of direct spark scars on pyrite and flint, while independent archaeologists called the evidence compelling amid rising European Paleolithic fire use around 400,000 years ago. Now that's news to me. So, if the earliest human-like life forms had created fire a lot earlier than expected, imagine what technological or mechanical advances that could have come since then that would then lead up to today. That's all I have to say about it. So, the more you know, the more you know. Silver surges past $60 per ounce for the first time. On Tuesday, silver crossed $60 on the spot market and traded near $60 on Wednesday after roughly $50 in late November. With a widely expected rate cut on Wednesday, investors shifted into silver as Federal Reserve's easing since January lowered returns on interest-bearing assets. Industrial demand now accounts for more than half of silver use, as manufacturers rely on silver's superior conductivity in electric vehicles and solar panels. Prospects of duties have prompted stockpiling and strained global supplies, as the United States imports about 2/3 of its silver, making manufacturers face higher costs amid traders nervousness over President Donald Trump's trade policies. Because most silver is a byproduct, supply cannot be quickly ramped up, and manufacturers expect prices to remain high in the coming months as silver's value has roughly doubled this year. Well, it's good news to anyone that was investing in silver like months before hearing this news. The, those people are going to have quite the field day for sure, and they're going to make quite a lot of bank too, if they continue holding on for the next few months. At the current rate, that silver prices are going up at the moment. So, fantastic. Crikiness. And a third thing, but I won't get into that. Never mind, already did. Madeline's Sophie Wickman, who wrote under the pen name Sophie Kinsella, has passed away at 55, her family said, describing her final days as filled with family, music, warmth, Christmas, and joy. Last year, Madeline Sophie Wickman revealed she had been diagnosed with aggressive brain cancer in 2022, writing on Instagram that she had glioblastoma and was receiving chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Known for the shopaholic novels, Sophie Kinsella sold more than 45 million copies worldwide, with the Shopaholic series adapted into the 2009 film Confessions of a Shopaholic, starring Isla Fisher. Her family said on Instagram they are heartbroken and announced Sophie Kinsella's passing, praising her courage and gratitude for family, friends, and her writing career. This breaking story is being updated, and more details will be published shortly. Readers can follow updates via the BBC News app or at BBC Breaking on Twitter X. Right, I'll put that on the back burner. But in regards to Sophie Kinsella, rest in peace. And I absolutely send my condolences to her friends and family. Personally, I don't know much about this woman, but I know for sure she has made quite the impact in the world that we live in. And of course, she will be missed, even if not many people know about it. But nonetheless, we must allow moments of grief for those who care, and for those that were close to Sophie Kinsella. South Korea will require advertisers to label AI-generated ads, including photos, videos, and audios using digitally fabricated experts or deepfakes. Officials plan to impose fines and punitive penalties next year to discourage false AI-generated ads and misinformation online. The government will seek to revise laws so the AI labeling requirements, along with strengthened monitoring and punitive measures, can take effect in early 2026. I agree, actually. A win for South Korea. As good AI is, and it is, there is a concern of how well AI can replicate media, footage, photos, just anything in the mediascape. And if they get too real to the point we don't even know it's AI, we're cooked. We're absolutely cooked. At this point, you may as well as provide training classes to detect what is AI and what is real. I hope classes like that exist. At least soon, if not now. I hope soon. Somali TikToker deported from US for spy kidnapping May. I'm trying to get something up, but okay, now it let me. A Somali migrant deported from the United States and labeled an illegal scumbag by the White House for aiding the kidnapping of two French spies in Mogadishu may have been wrongfully accused. Mahad Mahmoud returned to a hero's welcome in Somalia last month, not least because he is a hugely popular social media star whose online rants have earned him more than 450,000 TikTok followers. US authorities linked him to a long-running insurgent group, Al-Shabaab, which has ties to Al-Qaeda, but some in Somalia suspect he was the victim of online rivals, thanks to the often aggressive and ethnically tinged roasting contests that occurred between Somali TikTokers. AFP spent weeks investigating Maximud and gained testimony from Somali and French intelligence sources who cast doubt on the accusations. Somali migrants have been a focus on the current US administration, with President Donald Trump unleashing a tirade against the community last week, calling them garbage, who should go back to where they came from. Maximud was detained by the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) in Minnesota in May. In a post on Twitter X, on October 24th, the White House described him as a criminal legal scumbag who was involved in the kidnapping of French officials from Sahafi Hotel, Mogadishu. Yeah, I've heard a lot of whatever was going on in Minnesota, or just Minnesota in general. Now, I'm not saying that we should just forcibly take foreigners out of the US and back to their origin country. However, you do have to ask, not how they got into the US to begin with. What were they planning on doing during their time in the US? I think that's the more important question. And I'm not just talking about people from Somalia. I think this goes for anyone who is visiting any country that isn't their own. If you're going to a foreign country that you're not originally from, what are you doing there? What is the purpose of your visit? What is your impression of the surrounding environments and the culture of the country which you are visiting? Yeah, it's easy to just say foreigners bad because they don't respect our country. They should go back to their own country because if their country is so great, why are they here? Or something like that. And look, and this is not to say that you should ditch your own culture just to fit in with whatever culture of the country you're in. It is important, however, that if you are going to another country, or even residing in another country, separate from the country you're originally from, it is important that you understand the culture of that country and, to the best of your ability, respect the customs of said country. Not just for the sake of obedience or just assimilation, but it's at least the right thing to do, and it's also for your own safety. Because what if you go into another country, not knowing what the custom or the culture is, and then you say something, thinking, oh, it's normal, but for whatever reason, the locals of that country, they are shocked, they are offended by what you said. Even though you don't mean to be offensive, the local people in the country are offended anyway. Because there are cultural differences where it will be a problem, and you will be you will be in hot water if you're not aware of what's offensive, what's okay to do or say. It's not just about assimilation to foreign countries wherever you are if you are residing, or prioritizing the country in which you reside in over your your origin culture. It's all about understanding the culture which you are surrounded by. And again, to the best of your ability, respect said customs of the culture. You don't have to agree with them. However, there are reasons why people from all over the world migrate to other countries in the first place. And it's not just for the sake of escaping war from the country which they're from, nor is it the reason of seeking asylum because there is a life or death situation within the country which foreigners are from, where it is urgent to find a place to seek refuge. But when it comes to choosing a country where foreigners reside in, the culture which sits in the country, and maybe to some extent, even the welfare system that the country provides. And you know what? I don't blame them. If countries have problems with foreigners coming in because of the welfare they provide, don't provide the welfare. But of course, it is important, on the other hand, to understand the culture in the country which you reside in, and understanding the customs. So when you do communicate with people from the country, you at least know what you're getting yourself into, and people won't have any reason to say you should go back to where you came from. That's at least my perspective on things. So back to the Somali TikToker. Now, given what I've said, for this story alone, I am kind of mixed. Whilst there is an issue with safety for people in Minnesota, it's also another issue altogether about how people see foreigners as a whole, not just the countries which they've originated from. And if there are more stories like this where people from another country is causing problems in a country like the US, UK, Germany, etc., that's going to give governments, whoever's in power right now, all the more reasons to say foreigners are bad, we shouldn't accept any more of them. Again, I don't have anything against foreigners coming into countries to find job opportunities or just reside or take whatever benefits. Although I do question why welfare is so good for foreigners to begin with. But nonetheless, and I have said this many times, the question isn't who's coming in. The better question should be, how are they coming in? So yeah. Iceland becomes fifth country to boycott Eurovision over Israel's participation. On Wednesday, Iceland's public broadcaster UV announced it will not take part in Eurovision Song Contest 2026 in Vienna, notifying the European Broadcasting Union of its decision as the fifth country to withdraw. Stakeholders, including artists' associations and sections of the Icelandic public, urged the EBU to remove Khan, citing concerns raised at London and Geneva meetings, with UV saying public debate showed neither joy nor peace. At the EBU General Assembly, members from 56 countries adopted tougher voting rules but did not exclude Khan, though Sky News reported 11 opposed the changes without a further vote. The withdrawals have prompted warnings that walkouts by Iceland's RUV and broadcasters in Spain, the Netherlands, Ireland, and Slovenia damage Eurovision's unity, finances, and reputation. Wednesday's deadline means the European Broadcasting Union will publish a final list before Christmas as Eurovision 2020's 70th edition approaches at Vienna's Wiener Stadthalle in May. You know, I was wondering why Iceland didn't withdraw the moment the EU General Assembly happened, similar to the same time Ireland, Spain, Slovenia, and the Netherlands also withdrew. But nonetheless, since October 7th, for the 2024 contest in Malmö, Iceland were the first country to at least be made aware about concerns regarding Israel participation, but back then, at the time, it was down to the artist if she wanted to continue competing for Iceland at that year's Eurovision, which she did. So, yeah, well, I've heard a lot of people saying that Eurovision is done for, and they are partially right on that. But is Eurovision going to go ahead? not just for this year, but for years going forward? Yes, absolutely. Not saying it's right. However, like what happened with when Russia's military entered Ukrainian territory, every country broadcaster raised concern and awareness that if Russia was going to be in Eurovision, they were not taking part. And because so many countries at that time said they won't support Russia's participation, this made the EBU's decision a lot clearer and so easy to say, okay, Russia, you're not allowed in Eurovision anymore. And the rest is history. Belarus was not allowed to take part in Eurovision 1 year, but ever since Russia is no longer allowed to take part because of what's going on between them and Ukraine, people were certain that if enough broadcasters will express their concerns about a particular country taking part, surely the EB will do something about it. However, since October 7th happened, and even though there have been a handful of broadcasters and artists saying that Israel's participation should not happen, like what could have happened with Russia if not a lot of broadcasters or artists had expressed their concerns at that time, yet somehow Israel was still allowed to compete. And this is what a lot of people are bringing up. How is it that Israel is still allowed to compete despite what their government is doing in Gaza, yet it was okay for you to say Russia's not allowed to compete because of what they're doing to Ukraine? That's at least what I've heard. And of course, there will be discrepancies and there will be other perspectives from the other side about what's going on in the world. However, whatever is decided by the EPU will go ahead, even if a lot of people disagree with it. Regardless of support or fight or strong opposition, events like Eurovision and other global events will continue and they will go ahead, without question, all for the sake of having months of preparation and funding being put towards putting up the event in the first place and having the event go ahead and to have some kind of coverage, either locally or globally. And that is how things go in this world. Not saying it's good, not saying it should go ahead. However, even with strong opposition, major events will go ahead anyway, whether it be whether it be regards to months of preparation, the funding that goes towards putting up the event, as well as the opportunities and benefits given the event taking place, wherever it takes place. You never know, they may not get this opportunity again. So that's why there will be people that would be opposed against particular aspects if it threatens particular events from ever taking place, because they're not going to get that opportunity again for a while, if ever. Machado to miss Nobel ceremony, daughter accepts prize. The Nobel Institute confirmed Maria Corina Machado will not attend the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony at Oslo City Hall on Wednesday, 10th of December, facing a travel ban. Official warnings. Maria Corina Machado was last seen publicly on January 9th after a brief detention, and Venezuela's Attorney General Tarek William Saab warned she would be considered a fugitive if she left. Ana Karina Sosa Machado accepted the medal and gave the letter her mother wrote. The Nobel Institute said Machado has done everything to come and confirm that she is safe. The award framed Venezuela's struggle as an international concern, highlighting mass exile and institutional collapse, with an estimated 8 million Venezuelans having left, and Oslo's ceremony featuring an empty chair and Latin American heads of state, including Argentina's Javier Milei. The Nobel citation noted Machado's past year in hiding and her inspirational role for millions, while critics highlight her ties to Donald Trump and warned prolonged exile could erode her influence. Now, where do I begin? Now, people don't have to agree Marie, Marie. You don't have to agree with her views, or whatever the Venezuelan government is doing. But to prevent her from leaving the country, and then to call her a fugitive if she does so, now I think that crosses a couple lines, if not one. How are you going to how are you preventing someone from leaving their own country to accept a prize? Again, you don't have to agree with what she says or does, but you cannot hold people hostage within your own country. I think I feel that there should be I feel that there should be some kind of law in place that says you're not allowed to hold people fugitive within within someone's own country. At least I think there is such law exists. But even then, how desperate are the Venezuelan government to ensure that their opposition goes goes on with their lives or speak out against what their government is doing? And of course, I know that there'll be a handful of people that do not like Donald Trump, whether it be now or many years ago. Don't blame them for that. However, at least when it comes to like accepting an award for contributions for anything anywhere in the world, regardless of what opinions people have on said person, person's actions or sayings, yeah, there will be a handful of people that will stir up a fuss about not letting someone leave their country for the sake of accepting their award, and then to have someone's child, to accept that award on their behalf. So it's unfortunate, man. And this is separate to a person's actions within the country. But can you not let someone leave the country unless it's for security reasons? But I'm yet to hear what those security reasons would be. I would hear what those reasons could be, if there are any. Other than that, if you're going to prevent someone that is a strong opposition to what you're doing from leaving your country, I think it would be time for you to step down. Not because you have to, or people in your country are asking you to step down, but it's also likely down to the fact that if elections were to go ahead at any point, wouldn't you want to, wouldn't you elections to go ahead in hopes that you win? But what if you don't win, and another party actually wins the presidency or the governmental chambers? If the results differ to what you hope to happen, if you were in power to allow elections to go ahead, that says a lot about what a country's current government is doing right now and what people think of the current country's government. I'm just saying, regardless of what your opinions are on your current country's government, if if an election was to happen and whoever's in power says we can't allow elections to go ahead because of this event, which is affecting morale, or there's concerns of election fraud, don't be surprised people saying, "Oh, you want to hold on to power," and then if the elections go ahead anyway, another party wins. I think that says it all. It really does. And that is it for this episode.